Hello everyone, welcome to La Excellence IAS Daily Hindu News Analysis for 5th June 2020. 5th June is celebrated as World Environment Day every year. It has been celebrated from 1974. On 1972 5th June, Stockholm Conference on Human Environment was first convened and it is celebrated as World Environment Day since then. Let us today take pledge to make small changes in our lives so as to reduce the carbon footprint in the world. We can take simple measures so as to conserve water. For example, if we use bucket instead of shower, we can save a lot of water. We can segregate waste into dry waste and wet waste so as to use the wet waste for reuse. We can also constantly observe what our purchases are, what their footprint what their carbon footprint is going to be on the environment. Okay, so these small changes can go a long way in saving the environment. I have a small announcement to make. La Excellence IAS has come up with online live general studies prelims cum mains 2021 batch. Classes will be conducted in the online mode initially. Once the lockdowns are lifted up, we will be having offline classes. There is also a residential campus in Hyderabad. You can contact the numbers given in the slide for more details. The personality for today's discussion is Miss Greta Thunberg. She is a 17-year-old environmental activist from Sweden. She is known for her initiative at a very young age and for her straightforward speaking. She has addressed public as well as political leaders and assemblies and criticizes world leaders for their failure to take action to address the climate change. At 15 years of age in 2018, she had made lifestyle changes so as to reduce the carbon footprint. She became a vegan as well as she started upcycling the waste things at her home. She also gave up on flying so as to reduce the carbon footprint. She used to spend her school days outside the Swedish parliament. She called for stronger action on climate change. She used to carry a poster naming School Strike for Climate. Soon various other students from other communities joined and it began as a movement known as the Fridays for Future. She also addressed the 2018 conference of United Nations Conference on Climate Change and received many honors and awards. She also appeared in the Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People of the World. She was also nominated for the Nobel Prize 2 times in 2019 and 20. You all know about these facts, but what we all don't know is that she is a patient of Asperger's syndrome. It is one of the diseases in the autism spectrum. It is a developmental disorder wherein people fail to socialize or they cannot communicate effectively. She is also a patient of obsessive compulsive disorder and selective mutism. She tried to highlight in her speeches that being a patient of selective mutism, she only speaks when necessary. This highlights how important it is to discuss about climate change as well as to address the climate change that is happening. So this personality you can use in climate change related questions, also in sustainable development goals, because according to sustainable development goals, we have to make the world a secured place for the future and she is talking about the future rights. We can also use her, you can also use this personality in ethics, how she used the crisis as an opportunity, how she used her problems as an opportunity. Many of us keep complaining of the small disturbances we have in life when it comes to our preparation or for various other failings of our lives. But we can learn from her how crisis can be used as an opportunity. We can also use her example in ethics for talking about courage and also about how small actions can result in big movements. Let us all take the pledge today to save our environment. We should realize that we are compromising our children's future for our current needs by destroying environment. So on this World Environment Day, let us take the pledge to reduce the carbon footprint to whatever extent possible by us. Remember, the journey of 1,000 steps begins with a single step. As usual, our discussion will go on under 2 subheads. First one, daily editorial enrichment program, wherein we will be discussing about the important articles that appeared in the editorial page, and the targeted news analysis, where we will be discussing the other important news articles that appeared in the newspaper. The page numbers for the Hyderabad and Bengaluru edition of the Hindu are given and you can look at them. The notes for the discussion in the PDF format is available in the link below in the description. We also have an MCQs quiz daily at 9:30 p.m. excluding on Sundays. We have 10 MCQs for discussion. You can click the link given here in the description below so as to access the quiz at 9:30 p.m. sharp. The first article for the day is talking about man-animal conflict. We all are aware of the elephant which got injured because of ingestion of a pineapple laden with crackers, firecrackers. Because of it, the firecrackers bursted in the mouth of the elephant and it has died a painful death in a river in Palakkad. It was a painful sight to see. This article is talking about the man-animal conflict. Why these man-animal conflicts are on the rise? And we are going to touch the dimension of elephants' habitat destruction. This topic can be placed under General Studies Paper 3, Conservation and Environmental Impact Assessment. We will be learning about the reasons behind the increased elephant and human conflict in India. The important reasons are that we are destroying the habitats of animals for the commercial purposes. We are not following any scientific policy which encourages soft landscapes and also the migrating passages that will reduce the conflicts. You all must be aware of the elephant corridors which are crucial to reduce the animal fatalities. These are narrow strips of land. Elephant corridors are narrow strips of land which connect two large habitats. For example, if there are two habitats for elephants, these have to be connected by a corridor so that they can migrate from here to here and here to here easily, so that they can perpetuate their population and have a free life. But these corridors as well as these habitats are getting destroyed because of man's intervention. There is no scientific procedure as to spare the forested lands from the commercial exploitation. Even during the recent lockdown, Environment Ministry convened a video conference meetings of the National Board for Wildlife and Expert Appraisal Committee so as to clear the disruptive projects in the protected areas. So even these protected areas, the projects could get approval even during the lockdown through video conferencing. So because of the shrinking feeding grounds, the animals look for other avenues for feeding. These could be softer landscapes like the adjoining coffee, tea or cardamom estates. If they cannot find them, they will go into the food-rich farmers' farms. Okay. The pineapple with the explosives was said that it was intended for wild boars. Whatever be the animal, the issue is that of man-animal conflict because of wild animals entering human spaces. Why is that happening? It is because of the habitat destruction as well as the corridor destruction. Let us have a look at the various committee recommendations for protection of Western Ghats and also have a look on National Board for Wildlife. Western Ghats are a mountain range which run parallel to the western coast of Indian Peninsula. These are spread over 6 states starting from Gujarat to Kerala. Gujarat, Maharashtra, Goa, Karnataka, Kerala and Tamil Nadu have Western Ghats. These are the 6 states with Western Ghats, and 2 committees have been formed since 2010 to protect the ecologically sensitive areas in the Western Ghats. In 2010, Madhav Gadgil Committee was formed. It is known as Western Ghats Ecology Experts Panel. It came up with suggestions that a Western Ghats Ecology Authority has to be formed and 64% of the area has to be saved or conserved. It also advocated a bottom to top approach. It recommended that the entire stretch of Western Ghats should be declared as ESA or ecologically sensitive areas and divided the region into 3 zones, and various restrictions were placed on various activities in these 3 zones. So in ESZ 1 and 2, the red and orange category industries were not permitted. Even the existing industries were to be phased out by 2016. What are the red and orange category industries? The industries are divided into 4 categories known as red, orange, green and white based on their pollution index. Pollution index is a number from 0 to 100 depending upon the pollution emitted from these industries. Polluting substances emitted from these industries are categorized into red, orange, green and white. Red with a pollution index of more than 60, orange between 41 to 60, 20 to 40 green and white less than 20. Okay, based on the pollution index, industries are categorized into red, orange, green and white industries, and red and orange category industries were not permitted under ESZ 1 and 2 according to the Madhav Gadgil report. But this was criticized. This committee's recommendations were criticized that they were not in tune with the ground realities, and hence another committee was formed under Mr. K. Kasturirangan to advise the government on Gadgil's report. The Kasturirangan's report balanced the two concerns of development and environmental protection. We always have the dilemma between development and environmental protection, and Kasturirangan committee's report has tried to balance the two concerns and brought in only 37% of the Western Ghats under ecologically sensitive areas. Okay, the report divided the Western Ghats into two, that is natural landscape and cultural landscape. Of the natural landscape, only 37% was considered as biologically rich and with some continuity, and restrictions were placed only in this area. Okay, the demarcation of ecologically sensitive areas was done at village level according to Kasturirangan report, and according to Gadgil report it was required to be done at block level, but it was never implemented. Also, in the ecologically sensitive areas, only red category industries were completely restricted. So, whatever were the measures suggested by Gadgil report were diluted in the Kasturirangan report. So, this dilution has led to destruction of the Western Ghats to a large extent, and that has led to the destruction of habitats as well as corridors for elephants and other wild animals, and because of which there is increasing man-animal conflict now. Let us have a discussion on National Board for Wildlife too, because it is the supreme body to review all the wildlife related matters and to approve projects in and around the national parks as well as sanctuaries. It was constituted under Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. Okay, National Board for Wildlife, it is a supreme body to review all the wildlife related matters and to approve projects around the national parks and sanctuaries. It is headed by Prime Minister of India. Prime Minister is the chairman for National Board for Wildlife. Vice chairman is the Ministry of Environment, Minister of Environment. So, National Board for Wildlife has got 47 members including the chairperson, and 19 members are ex officio members. Let us also talk about the status of conservation of elephants in India. We have around 30,000 elephants in India, and elephant is placed under Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act of 1972, which means that hunting or trading can attract rigorous imprisonment and a hefty fine. What are the issues with respect to elephant conservation? Elephants are poached for their tusks and other body parts. Also, the habitat destruction part, which we have already discussed, and increasing human-animal conflict, human-elephant conflict arising out of it. Also, they are mistreated in captivity in some states. Elephant is declared as the national heritage animal of India. We have started a project known as Project Elephant. It is a centrally sponsored scheme so as to conserve elephants, their habitats as well as the corridors. It was started in 1992, and the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change gives both financial and technical support to the elephant range states under this Project Elephant. Elephant census is conducted every 5 years, and we use both direct as well as indirect counting methods. Direct counting method involves sighting of the elephants, and indirect method means a dung decay formula. We also have had a Gaj Yatra, which was a nationwide campaign to protect the elephants. So, this is the status of elephant conservation in India. The next article is talking about alternative proteins. The dimension is alternative protein for planetary health. We are all discussing about the health of the planet in these critical times of COVID-19 and various other diseases. Here, this is a topic that can be placed either under General Studies paper 3 under the issues related to food security and nutrition security and economics of animal rearing, or it can be placed under General Studies paper 2, that is the government policies and interventions in various sectors and issues arising out of their design and implementation. The issue is that of alternative protein, and the dimension is the usage of alternative protein for the health of the planet. We are going to learn about what are the ill effects of factory farming, that is the hazards involved in factory farming, and what is the way forward for India with respect to increasing the protein security or nutrition security of India. This article is telling about the concept of planetary health. That is, every human action is having its impact on the Earth's ecology. The COVID-19 pandemic, which has also resulted from human-animal interaction and human reliance on animals. It is also talking about the ill effects of factory farming. Factory farming refers to large-scale industrial animal agriculture being done for the production of meat, eggs and dairy. Okay, it requires large tracts of land for factory farming, also huge amounts of water. Already the world is facing acute water shortages and water crisis like situations, and because of factory farming, large tracts of lands and water are being utilized. Also, these produce the gas known as methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas which has much more effects than vehicular emissions. Also, the seafood production is associated with elimination of some species, habitat destruction and environmental degradation. Also, we have seen that animal rearing has become the source of various viral outbreaks like that of swine flu as well as avian flu and the current COVID-19. What is the status of factory farming in India? Factory farming has not yet well developed in India as compared to other countries like USA, Brazil or China, but it is being looked at as a good source of income as well as employment. But the problem is that of water scarcity and diminishing land holdings in India. So what is the need for India? It is needed to build the strengths in agriculture. Okay, we have to build up our strengths in agriculture and manufacturing so as to create a new food system. This article talks about usage of alternative proteins so that agriculture is supported as well as manufacturing is supported. The article also tries to conclude saying that food security and agricultural income are among the high priorities for our nation, and we can turn the crisis of COVID-19 into an opportunity by stimulating the research in the alternative proteins. This article also tells about various organizations which are promoting for the diversification of proteins. One such organization is Food and Land Use Coalition. This is a community of various organizations and individuals who are committed to transform the ways of food production and consumption. See, we have to transform the way food is produced and the way it is consumed so as to protect our planet. So this Food and Land Use Coalition is a coalition of all those organizations which are trying to transform the ways of food production and consumption and also of the land use patterns. Okay, this is just one coalition. Other than this, WHO and other organizations are suggesting for alternative proteins or diversification of proteins when compared to the animal proteins alone. Let us have a look at these alternative proteins. What are these proteins? We usually use animals as good source of proteins. Animal sources of food could be eggs or meat from various animals. But in addition to these, we can have other good sources of proteins which are known as the alternative proteins. They could be plant-based. For example, various legumes, grains, nuts, etc. are all good sources of proteins. Also, the algae can be used to produce protein biomass which can be used to serve as a good source of alternative protein. There is another concept known as fermented protein, wherein the process of fermentation is used by making use of yeast to produce casein and whey protein, which is usually used by bodybuilders so as to build up the muscle. Also, insect protein is another alternative protein. And the most important is cultured protein, wherein animal muscle cells or animal tissue cells are used to culture proteins artificially without rearing the animals. Some of the research has gone in these area in various countries like Singapore and Canada. They are trying to make alternative protein a part of their food security with an emphasis on the research, entrepreneurship and self-sufficiency, and hence India has to emulate this model so as to support alternative proteins so that both agricultural income could be supported and food security and nutrition security could be ensured. The next article is talking about USA and China relations, the disputes which have been occurring in the recent times, and how India is facing a challenge by becoming a collateral damage in the spat between USA and China. So the issue is with respect to US and China relations, and the dimension is that of emergence of a new Cold War like tensions between China and US. This can be placed under General Studies Paper 2, International Relations, Effects of Policies and Politics of Developed and Developing Countries on India's Interests. Here, this article is speaking about the role USA has played in China's enhanced global posture, and also to understand the new tensions between China and US and the nascent ideological differences between USA and China. The article talks about the historical relationship between USA and China. In the early years of Chinese communist takeover, when the communists seized power in China, USA believed that they could cohabit with these communists with US hegemony, within the US hegemony. In 1970s, the President Richard Nixon, he established diplomatic relations with China and raised its acceptability to the world. Till then, there were no diplomatic relationships between USA and China, and first time Richard Nixon has established diplomatic relations with China. And later on, Mr. Jimmy Carter, he went further and terminated the relationships with Taiwan so as to convince or so as to normalize the relations with China in 1978. And in 1989, the sins of Tiananmen. What is Tiananmen sins? There were democracy movements in China which were brutally suppressed. All these sins were also overlooked by George H.W. Bush so as to establish good relations with China. So, the author says that USA has played an important role in the acceptability of China by the world and increasing its stature in the world. But what has China done with US? What is China's relationship vis-a-vis US? It is said that the author is saying that China has pursued US with selfish purpose. Chinese allowed them to believe that they are anti-Soviet and extracted their price. But in disguise, they acknowledged the threat to the communist regime by the US. Okay, this was exemplified after the collapse of Soviet Union. And so, China is now trying to shy away from the United States. China is trying to create its own parallel world through various initiatives like Belt and Road Initiative, wherein it is trying to create an alternate trading system. Also, it is trying to create an alternative multilateral banking system through Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and New Development Bank. It has its own global positioning system known as BeiDou. It has its own digital payment platforms known as WeChat Pay and Alipay. And also it has developed world-class digital network, 5G network under Huawei. There are also cutting-edge technological processes in the sunrise industries, and modernization of military to a great extent has taken place. The author is trying to say that despite USA playing a major role in increasing the stature of China in the world, China has been pursuing the US with a selfish intent, and it is creating a parallel world by all these initiatives. The USA-China tussle has increased, especially after Trump administration has taken over in the USA. In 2018, trade war has begun by Trump administration, and various recent announcements have increased the disputes between China and USA. After China has decided to enact a new national security law for Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a specially administrative region of China which got independence from British only in 1997, and it enjoys a special status with respect to China. It has more democratic principles in its administration. But now, by this new national security law, China is trying to curb the freedom of expression of people by banning various activities as being seditious. So this was met with resistance throughout the Western countries, and USA has said that it would revoke Hong Kong's special trade status. Hong Kong's special trade status would be revoked. Also, there was an order that was passed which limited the Chinese graduate students and researchers from entering US who may have ties with the People's Liberation Army of China. Also, USA has asked the financial regulators to closely examine the Chinese firms listed in the US stock markets and warned that those who do not comply could be delisted. So, various announcements have been made by US regarding China, and there is increasing tussle between USA and China, and this can have an collateral damage on India because India will not be able to take independent decisions with respect to either of these countries, and India should tread cautiously and it should try to maintain strategic autonomy with respect to its relationship with both these countries. The next article is a discussion about the regulation of content on social media, whether the social media platforms are acting as arbiters of truth. The context is that of Mr. George Floyd's death. He is an African American who died in police custody, and there have been massive protests in the United States of America following his death. Twitter has called some of the president's tweets as incorrect information and against its policies, while Trump warned social media platforms for stricter controls. Facebook stated that they did not want to take similar actions because they did not want to be seen as arbiters of truth. This topic can be placed under the issue of social media platforms under General Studies Paper 2 Governance, E-Governance and issues relating to transparency and accountability. So the dimension we have already discussed, whether the social media platforms are acting as arbiters of truth, and we are going to learn about the section 79 of the IT Act and section 230 of Communications Decency Act of the US. This article gives us arguments both in favor of social media platforms regulating the content as well as against. The point in favor of these platforms acting as regulators or arbiters is that the user as well as platform have got an agreement. The user platform agreements are highly in favor of the platforms so that the user's content can be easily regulated. As a result, the social media platforms have to take the moral responsibility of controlling the regulation. This is what the argument in favor says. Whereas there are arguments against social media platforms acting as arbiters or against social media regulators controlling the content. What are these arguments which are against? First and foremost, these are private organizations. They can run by their own rules and regulations subject to the Constitution of India. Also, there are many real-time challenges with respect to the content which is posted on these platforms. There is a very huge volume of content that is shared across these platforms, and it is quite impractical to control or access all this content and control or regulate it. Also, there is another problem of over censorship or politically motivated censorship in the name of regulation of content. Okay, over censorship could be done or politically motivated censorship could be done. So this school of thought who are talking about against regulation by social media platforms say that social media platforms have been created only for engagement and not to provide the truth or not to act as arbiters of truth. They are only for engaging people and they are there to raise the money, and it is not their responsibility to act as arbiters of truth. The article also suggests a way forward. It says that the monopoly which is enjoyed by the platforms because of the user platform agreement has to reduce, and the structural problems have to be addressed, and the procedures have to be overhauled. What are these procedures that the article is talking about? The article gives an example from Germany. The Germany has a law according to which any social media company which has more than 2 million customers or 2 million users should have proper processes in place so as to receive the complaints as well as to disable the access to the illegal content. According to the law, these companies also have to increase their transparency mechanisms and also make public disclosures of how they handle the complaints so that the transparency is high. They can employ either self-regulation or co-regulation. Okay, co-regulation is taking the help of users to regulate the content. Okay, so we can adopt these practices in India also, but always self-regulation is better than political regulation. As the article has mentioned about section 79 of the Information Technology Act, let us discuss about it. This act, IT Act, was enacted in the year 2000, and section 79 provides immunity to the intermediaries. Who are the intermediaries? These are the social media platforms. These intermediaries have got immunity to any illegal content which is posted by a third party. For example, if I am posting any illegal content on Facebook, the Facebook is having immunity as long as it is not having a knowledge of this illegal content. But if the intermediary receives actual knowledge of the illegal content, it is obligated to remove the content within 36 hours. Within 36 hours, the illegal content has to be removed. If it fails to do so, the intermediary, that is the Facebook, will lose its immunity from being sued. Okay, so this is the section 79 of Information Technology Act of 2000 in India. What is section 230 of Communications Decency Act of United States of America? This section is similar to section 79 of IT Act of 2000. It gives immunity to the intermediaries or social media platforms like Facebook or Twitter so that they will not be sued against the content posted in their platforms. Okay, for the content which is posted in their platforms, they will not be sued. This is to prevent them from moderating the content which is posted on their platforms. What is meant by moderating? Moderating is controlling the content that is posted on their platforms. This will result in extreme stress on the platforms, and it will hamper any sort of innovations and investments in this sector. So innovations and investments in this sector will be reduced, and as a result, this article says that social media platforms should not be asked for acting as arbiters, and they should be acting only as media of engagement of people. So the main function of social media is engaging people, and they should serve only this purpose, not as arbiters. The next article, Disasters Displace Lags. This is a study by Center for Science and Environment. It published a report which is known as State of India's Environment Report. We are going to discuss about the various findings in the report. Also, we will be discussing about the reasons for internal displacement in the country, the various reasons and the percentage of these reasons responsible for the displacement. Also, we will be discussing about the implication of such displacements. This question can be placed in General Studies paper 3 under Disasters and Disaster Management. Also, it can be placed under General Studies paper 1 under the topic of migration. The article is trying to say that India has been witnessing internal displacements more frequently, and majority of them are caused by natural calamities. For example, in the world, in the year 2019, for every 5 displacements happening throughout the world, 1 displacement was happening in India. And the most important reasons were cyclone or flood or drought. Okay, in 2019 alone, there were 50 lakh internal displacements in India. These displacements do not mean movement of people, but every moment one person may move 2 times or 3 times. So there were total of 50 lakh internal displacements or 5 million internal displacements within the year 2019. This report also tried to analyze the 2011 census data on migrant workers. 2011 census data on migrant workers. Also it tried to give a data on tigers. So the essence of the article is that the internal displacements are happening more frequently in India, especially because of the natural calamities. Let us have a look at the displacement statistics of India in the past few years. On an average, around 3.6 million internal displacements happen every year in India between 2008 to 2019, and in 2019, as we have already discussed, there have been 50 lakh or 5 million internal displacements, which is a new high. Also, India has highest level of disaster displacement in South Asian countries. And in 2019, a new element was added or has added to new displacements, that is conflicts. Because of conflicts, 19,000 new displacements have occurred in 2019. So what are the various reasons for these internal displacements? Disasters are said to be one of the important reasons. For example, droughts, earthquakes, cyclones, tsunamis and floods. These are the various disasters which lead to displacements. 68% of India's landscape is prone to drought. 68% of India is prone to drought, and 60% of Indian land is prone to earthquakes. 75% of the coast is vulnerable to cyclones and tsunamis. This data you can use in mains answers relating to disaster management. So 68% of India's landmass is susceptible to drought, 60% to earthquakes, 75% to cyclones and tsunamis. Because of having southwest monsoonal rainfall, entire country or most of the country's land is susceptible to floods. This is especially so with respect to Brahmaputra and Ganga plains. Also, tropical cyclones are more commonly seen in the eastern coast of the country, and earthquakes are common in the northern states which border Nepal and Pakistan. The second reason for displacement other than disasters is conflicts. Of late, we have seen conflicts when the government revoked the special status to Jammu and Kashmir, which led to protests in Delhi, because of which large-scale displacement to the adjacent states has happened. The other conflict-prone regions are Naxalite Maoist insurgency affected regions, so-called the Red Corridor region. And then developmental projects also lead to displacement of people, large numbers of people. What are the impacts? Impacts because of these displacements. Because of the displacements, people may not find any job opportunities or employment opportunities, which results in increasing poverty. They are leaving behind all their properties in their home states or in their home regions, because of which they will be thrown into poverty because of job loss as well as property loss. Also, there will be a loss of social security because they are leaving behind their things. They cannot have access to social security like the ration as well as health security, at least for a brief period of time. There will be a rise in unemployment as well as a pressure on the current employment. So, rise in unemployment or pressure on the current employment opportunities. There will be rise of child labor, also reduction in girl child's schooling, and rise in atrocities against the migrant women. So, these are the various impacts of displacement. This article is giving us various facts with respect to displacements in India, how India is having the highest number of displacements in South Asia, to the extent of 5 million displacements per year in 2019. The next article is talking about ICRA, which is a credit rating agency, which said that the bad loans in India's public sector banks are going to rise sharply, because of which they are going to see a year of loss. This is going to be a continuous 6th year of loss for the public sector banks, according to the ICRA report. The issue is that of bad loans. What are bad loans? Those loans which are not being serviced regularly are termed as bad loans. And here we are going to discuss the dimension of asset quality stress on public sector banks. This topic can be placed under General Studies Paper 3 Indian Economy and Government Budgeting, and here we are going to learn about the impact of lockdown on debt servicing and in turn its effect on the asset quality of the public sector banks. The ICRA estimated that the non-performing assets will be rising from 8.6% to 11.3 to 11.6%. So 8.6% to 11.3 to 11.6%. The article also says that the uncertainty of banks' asset quality would be as high as 30 to 40%. So 30 to 40% of the bank loans will be uncertain whether they are of good quality or bad quality. The slippage rate would be around 5 to 5.5%. Slippage rate refers to the fresh accretion of non-performing assets in the previous year. For example, if for last year the NPAs were 9% and in this year they are 14%, it would mean a slippage of 5%. And according to ICRA, the next year would see a gross slippage of 5 to 5.5%. Also, ICRA has estimated that a capital infusion of 45,000 crores to 82,500 crore is required for infusing the PSBs. Okay, earlier it was estimated that only 10,000 to 20,000 crore were required, and that too the banks were expected to borrow from the market. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting lockdown, everything has been turned down and we are facing a threat of bad loans rising because of inability to service the debts, and as a result the asset quality of PSBs is going to be damaged. Let us have a look at what NPA means. Banks usually classify an asset as non-performing asset. NPA is non-performing asset if it is more than 90 days overdue. That is, if the borrower has not paid for more than 90 days, it is classified as non-performing asset. And for agricultural loans, if the interest or the principal, if it remains unpaid for 2 harvest seasons, it is considered as NPA. Okay, more than 90 days or 2 harvest seasons. Let us have a look at classification of various assets given by the banks or financial intermediaries. The loans which are given by banks or financial intermediaries are known as assets for these. Why are they assets? Because they earn the interest. The source of income for the banks as well as the financial intermediaries is the interest given by the loan borrowers. As a result, these loans are considered as assets for the banks and financial intermediaries, and these assets are classified into 2 types. They could be standard assets or non-performing assets. What are standard assets? Those assets which have been serviced regularly. Again, we have 2 types here, regular assets and stressed assets. Regular assets are those assets wherein there is no delay in the repayment of either interest or the principal amount. Whereas stressed assets are those where there is less than 90 days of delay in servicing of these loans. The stressed assets are further divided into 3 types: SMA 0, 1 and 2. SMA 0, 1 and 2. SMA 0 is when there is a delay of 1 to 30 days. SMA 1 is when there is a delay of 31 to 60 days. SMA 2 is when there is a delay of between 61 to 90 days. Okay, when somebody fails to pay the interest or principal beyond 90 days, it is categorized as non-performing asset, as we have already discussed. So, non-performing assets wherein more than 90 days there is a delay of servicing the loan. So, these are further classified. The NPAs are further classified into 3 types: substandard assets, doubtful assets and loss assets. Okay, what are substandard assets? They are NPAs for up to 12 months. If for 12 months somebody is not paying their interest or payment, it is considered as a substandard asset. And doubtful asset, where the NPA is for more than 12 months. For more than 12 months somebody has not serviced their loans, it is considered as a doubtful asset. And loss asset is, it is recoverable but it is removed from the balance sheets. For all practical purposes, the bank removes this asset from the balance sheets, but still the attempts at recovering are done. Okay, this is the classification of various assets held by the bank. Let us also know about who a willful defaulter is. Willful defaulter has been defined by RBI. RBI defines that willful defaulter is one who is financially capable to repay but he does not pay. Okay, also who diverts the funds for purposes other than what the fund was availed for. For example, if I borrow some amount for house construction but I use it for a marriage, then it is considered as willful default. Also, those borrowers who use the security, the asset which is used as a security to obtain the loan, if the property is sold or disposed of, that person is considered as a willful defaulter. Let us also have a look at Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. This code applies to companies and individuals, not to financial intermediaries. Remember, it applies only to the companies and individuals. It provides for a time-bound process to resolve the insolvency of the companies. Whenever a default happens in the repayment, for example, if this is a company which has borrowed from a bank, okay, this company has borrowed from a bank and this company has defaulted on repayment, then the creditors, that is the banks which have given the loan, can form a consortium or can invoke the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, and as a result of which an insolvency professional is appointed, or creditors gain control over the debtor's assets. Debtor is the one who borrows. So creditors, they gain control over the debtor's assets and they can take decisions so as to resolve the insolvency. So effectively, the IBC or the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code has tried to consolidate the current legislative framework and try to bring a common forum for the debtors and creditors so as to resolve the insolvency. Let us now see the difference between insolvency and bankruptcy. What is the difference between insolvency and bankruptcy? Insolvency is a situation where individuals or companies are unable to repay their outstanding debt, whereas bankruptcy is where a court which has got competent jurisdiction has declared, okay, he is legally declared. Whenever he is legally declared that a person or entity is insolvent, it is known as bankruptcy. It is legal declaration of one's inability to pay off the debts. Okay, with this discussion, let us move to the next article. The next article is talking about the India-Australia meet, strengthening the ties between India and Australia. There was a video conferencing between the Indian Prime Minister and the Australian Prime Minister, and they took the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. This was a virtual summit. So the issue is that of India-Australia relations, and the dimension is the decisions taken at first bilateral virtual summit. Okay, the topic is that of GS Paper 2 International Relations, Bilateral, Regional and Global Groupings Involving India or Affecting India's Interests. And here the learning objectives are about various agreements that are signed between India and Australia. Also, we will have a background about the India-Australia relationships. There were various outcomes of this virtual summit. The most important is raising the relationship between India and Australia to a comprehensive strategic partnership level. Okay, comprehensive strategic partnership level. What does strategic partnership mean? These are declarative instruments which give a commitment so as to build a long-term relationship. Okay, long-term relationship by deepening the ties as well as agreeing on issues of mutual interest. Then what does comprehensive means? Comprehensive means the strategic partnership involving various dimensions like economic, social, defense and so on. Okay, so comprehensive strategic partnership will always be well defined. It will have clearly stated mission statements as well as clearly stated areas of cooperation, and also the responsibilities are clearly stated in a comprehensive strategic partnership. Also, the meet has resulted in signing of MLSA. MLSA is Mutual Logistic Support Agreement. Okay, what is Logistic Support Agreement? This agreement will allow two countries to use each other's military bases for various purposes. It could be for logistic support or for food, water, petroleum, or harbor for ships, ships maintenance, refueling, passage exercises and so on. Okay, We have got logistic support agreement with various countries like USA, France, Singapore, etc. Also, the summit has resulted in 2+2 dialogue. 2+2 dialogue is the format of dialogue where the defense and foreign ministers or secretaries meet with their counterparts from the other country. It is a highest level institutional mechanism between two countries after countries' heads level. That is, now we have seen the discussion between the prime ministers of both the countries. After this level, the highest level is 2+2 dialogue, and there was an agreement that such 2+2 dialogues will be happening at least every alternate year. So there was importance given to the free and open Indo-Pacific region. The main focus was on this, concentrating on the freedom of navigation, peaceful and cooperative use of the seas, and respecting the international maritime laws given by UNCLOS UNCLOS. Okay, India has certain issues with China. Also, Australia has certain issues, but these issues were not brought in during the meeting. Also, the Malabar exercises or Quad has not come in the talks between India and Australia. Let us have a brief look at India-Australia relations. Both the countries were under British rule before their independence, and both the countries are Commonwealth nations now. They are part of common groupings like G20, ASEAN+6, Indian Ocean Rim Association, etc. Both of them are founding members of United Nations, and Australia is supporting India's claim of Arunachal Pradesh, which China says that it is a part of southern Tibet. Also, we have got certain military relations in the form of AUSINDEX, which are joint naval exercises in the Indian Ocean between Australia and India. These are conducted every 2 years. So, AUSINDEX is the naval exercise in the Indian Ocean between the two countries conducted every 2 years. What are Malabar exercises? Malabar exercises are the joint exercises between the navies of India, Japan and USA. Initially, they were between USA and India alone when they started in 1992. Okay. Later on, Japan joined in 2015. Now, the talks are going on to join Australia also, but in the current meeting, this did not find place. With respect to Quad, Quad is a quadrilateral grouping involving 4 countries. What are the 4 countries? Japan, USA, Australia and India. It was initially conceived in 2007 by Japan. Okay, all these 4 countries have something in commonality. What is it? All the 4 are democratic nations, and all the 4 countries have interest in unhindered maritime trade and security. So they want free and open trade in the Indo-Pacific region. So these are the 2 commonalities between these 4 countries of Quad. It was proposed in 2007 by Japan. Initially, all the countries had joined, but because of taking an anti-China stand, Australia withdrew later. But in 2017, Australia again expressed its interest to rejoin the Quad. So, India and Australia have got a lot of commonalities, and this virtual summit is expecting to strengthen the ties between India and Australia. Let us have a look at 2 prelims practice questions. The user-generated information is now seen for authenticity always before publishing by the social media platforms. The second statement is state regulation of any kind on the social media platforms. State regulation on the social media platforms is violation of Article 19 of the Constitution. The third statement is intermediaries are provided immunity for illegal content posted on their platforms by third party as per the IT Act of 2000. Which of the following statements is correct about social media platforms and their regulations? The second question is, which of the following statements are correct about the India-Australia bilateral virtual summit? Australia is included in the quadrilateral maritime exercise named Malabar. The summit allows the 2 countries to use each other's bases on reciprocal basis for military and humanitarian purposes. Chinese aggression across LAC that is line of actual control, is declared as unprecedented and unilateral at the summit. The two countries agreed for a collective security and defense in times of threat to either country due to a third party aggression. So which is the correct statement? You have to pick it up and mention in the comment section below. Before ending the discussion, let me tell you that Kalam's mains answer writing program season 3 has begun. It is scheduled to be having 100 episodes and they are going to discuss previous year's questions by subject experts. There is going to be a discussion by the subject experts about writing of various mains answers. Try to follow this season regularly for enhancing your mains answer writing skills. That's all for today's discussion. UPSC has given the revised dates for this year's exam, and UPSC Civil Services exam is going to be conducted on October 4th of 2020. The preliminary is going to be conducted on October 4th. Kindly orient your preparation and orient your schedule according to that, and try to use this time effectively for both your mains as well as prelims preparation so as to reap the maximum benefits out of this crisis-like situation. Thank you everyone. See you all again soon.